Hi guys, there was a super important match a few weeks ago to determine who would go to the Frankfurt Major as part of the European qualifiers, and it came down to one crucial game in between Alliance and NiP, where Alliance were actually down mega creeps and NiP had 5 buybacks and Aegis and Cheese. And I wanted to break down a couple of the important parts of the last 5 or so minutes of the game that led to Alliance actually being able to pull out this win. If you want to watch watch the game yourself, you can just go to Watch tab, click on Frankfurt Major, view Alliance versus NiP game number 2. So NiP are up by mega creeps. There's also one racks down on the side of NiP, but not that big of a deal. And they have observer wards all outside of their base from Alliance. Firstly, you want to make sure that you kind of always see where NiP is if you're Alliance, so that they don't catch you by surprise. Having observer wards like this, because you don't have any buildings over there, is the first step. And it doesn't seem like it's that important, but you'll see that their field of vision is almost like doubled, I would say, because of these observer wards. And this is just very experienced support players trying to give as much information to your team so that they can make the right plays. So a couple of things before this Roche pickup, we see S4 deviate from his normal build on Queen of Pain. He usually goes treads Orchid, BKB, AC, but this time he actually opted for a Shiva's Guard. And Shiva's Guard is actually huge in defending the base versus mega creeps. If you watched this game and a couple of the fights during the game, you'll notice that they don't actually get swarmed by mega creeps like you would expect. And a lot of it does have to do with the Shiva's Guard as well as the Alchemist Radiance. So when you get a Shiva's Guard on Queen of Pain, the 45% aura attack slow isn't usually that evident because attack speed is additive. So let's take a hero like Juggernaut. Juggernaut has plus 100 agility and then some attack speed from Butterfly as well as Manta. So let's just, and Drum. So let's just say he's at like plus 145% attack speed. So he's actually acting at 245% attack speed. And then you get the minus 45 from Queen of Pain. The minus 45 is not multiplicative, it's additive. If it were multiplicative, he'd end up having 135-ish attack speed. But instead of 135, he actually has 200 because it's additive. So it only decreases his attack speed by like a sixth instead of 45%, which is a pretty big difference. So it's not actually that noticeable on heroes because they generally have a lot of attack speed, at least the heroes that matter. But for NPCs like Creeps and Roshan, it actually generally really reduces their damage by straight 45%, which is massive. So that's kind of the first step to kind of deal with mega creeps outside of the obvious of getting Maelstrom and auras, other auras like Vlad's and AC. And on top of that, they have the Radiance with the Alchemist, which is a 70% miss. So they already attack at 55% attack speed. And then on top of that, they have 17% miss, which means they're connecting on 5/6 of their attacks. So if you take 55% and then multiply that by 5/6, they're actually doing half the damage that a normal mega creep would do. So the mega creeps are about half as effective just because of these two items, which I thought was pretty darn surprising. And let's see, NiP decide to push up this hill. I'm gonna go through these fights pretty briefly. If you watched MLG, the Juggernaut actually went I think Blink Abyssal Battle Fury on the Juggernaut. Aggressive did in a really stunning performance by him. And they don't actually have any mobility on the side of NiP aside from the one Blink Dagger on the Puck, which is pretty important because there's this fight that leads up. Let me try and slow it down a little bit. And they actually ping out on Loda, and they want to gank him. And we see a Blink Coil, but his team comes up, but no one can actually follow up on him. This is the ridiculously long stun that we're talking about on the Puck. He has a Coil with a Scepter, so that's 4.5 seconds of stun, but he doesn't actually die during this. He chooses to run outside and break the Coil, and he just kind of doesn't take any damage for a few seconds, which is a really big deal. If they kill him right here, which is a really long time, 4.5 second stun, they could have ended the game when they killed him the next time, but he actually doesn't die at this point. He Manta styles out of the Omni Slash that Era casts, and he ends up living. So NiP pretty much go through most of their cooldowns and ultimates throughout this fight. Cheeses popped, Satanics popped, so these two guys live, and they end up taking down one of the heroes on either side, rendering it a 4v4 for the meantime. And keep in mind, NiP, they have a lot of stuff to work with. They have the Aegis, Cheese, and 5 buybacks, so pretty much 12 lives. So you knew that this was going to be a rather extended fight. So next, they try and push further towards the throne and pressure Alliance a little bit more. And they kind of want to wait until all 3 lanes are pushed in. I guess they're probably waiting for the next creep wave. And here they go. They try and go for a fight, and nice Orchid by S4. You kind of see them split up in terms of teamwork. It's pretty much these, like Limp is trying to kill the heroes. Handskin and the Puck are trying to kind of walk around and use their spells whenever they can. And Era is actually really focused on killing the buildings. And they still have Glyph up on the Radiant side. So they're on like 3 different game plans here. They're like, some of their team wants to kill them all so they don't have buybacks and so that they can just win the game without any heroes defending. Era wants to end the game just by right-clicking the throne because they have mega creeps. Not that one idea is necessarily better than the other. Most of the times there is one idea that's better than the other, but the important part is that NiP is not on the same game page here. They're kind of split in their decision. They don't have a unified team play, and the cohesiveness really costs them at this point. So Era starts right-clicking, and you see these 2 heroes just kind of walking around doing nothing. Era's like, well, what are you guys doing? Why is no one else attacking? And Limp, again, goes for the heroes. But Era isn't there to follow up after this. They could have killed S4 right there if they had just a little bit more damage, but they end up not. And Era decides to go in for right-clicking the tower. I think Limp sacrifices his Aegis pretty soon, and still you see Era attacking this while these 2 are kind of running around and Limp still trying to fight. So they're kind of like swarmed by megas right now, and Era decides to back off, get a few pot shots on the tower while he has magic immunity, and then right now is a point where, like, okay, he's running away, he's like trying to deal with this illusion, and Limp BKBs up and man fights and actually manages to take down Loda, which would have been a much bigger deal had they killed them right here. So he buys back, and Limp's still trying to man fight them. Era's still trying to push the creeps in, and eventually they get owned by this ward over here. And it's really important that they are all clumped up right here. If they weren't all clumped up, it would have only hit like 1 hero instead of 3. So if Era were on like the left side, Limp were on the bottom side, and the supports were spread out trying to right-click the throne, they might have actually taken down the throne or at least gotten the glyph, so that buying back and BOTing in is at least a reasonable solution. But without the with the glyph still up and them kind of dying one by one, it wasn't really a feasible option for them to just brute force the throne. And they take way too much damage from Ake's Death Ward. I think he had Scepter for quite a bit before this, so it shouldn't have caught them completely off guard. And on top of that, they just get owned by the AoE of like casks and Ignite and whatnot by Alliance. So they eventually kill Limp, and then we see a buyback coming out from the Puck, who TPs onto the top, and then we see a buyback from the Shadow Fiend as well, and they actually lose the Puck again right after he buys back. He gets multicasted right here, and then he dies. So 3 heroes buy back, and they actually don't get anything out of it. So that's actually a really big deal too. They could have probably just none of them buy back, and then they just wait for Alliance to, you know, if they push their base, they can just buy back and then maybe BOT bottom and then try and throne race them because they don't have any protection. They don't have the T2 down in mid. They don't have the T3 up or the T4s that NiP had the luxury of having. So they kind of wasted their buybacks, and that's a very large time span for Alliance to take advantage of that. Also of small note is that they lose the gem on the Crystal Maiden, which is a little bit of a big deal later into the game. So NiP, they're kind of waiting for the heroes to revive and kind of take it easy for the next little bit. The next important part is 52-44, where NiP try and actually make their move while Loda still has his buyback on cooldown for 4 minutes. So it's pretty obvious to them that they kill Loda, they probably win the game right here. So Steel Kid places an observer ward over here. He doesn't drop his sentry even though they have one. And ideally they would have had a gem. They have a slot on, like, let's say Handskin, who has a mango, and they could have taken down this ward. But if you actually look at it from Alliance's point of view, they actually see everything over here because they don't have a gem on the side of NiP. They could have easily killed the observer ward right here if they had a gem. So Alliance are able to make the informed decision to jump Limp when he's slightly isolated from his team. And if you look at it from NiP's perspective, they're trying to sit in the fog. It's nighttime and they don't think that Alliance has vision over them. So all this was possible because they didn't have a gem, and of course the excellent play by the supports to actually place the observer wards outside. So Limp kind of looks isolated from Alliance's point of view. He's the only hero around, so they end up actually roaring him. He gets 4-stepped out, and then they still commit to him and eventually drop him down. And at this point, NiP is like in a lot of trouble because they are without a buyback on Shadow Fiend, which is really, really bad. And on top of that, they get 5-man team wipe because they weren't able to focus on Ake. Of other note, they didn't have an Abyssal or any BKB piercing spells. I think a lot of players actually get MKB when it's not completely necessary versus a Radiance. They don't have any Solar Crest or Butterfly, so you're only dealing with 17% miss. And I think you can get a lot more value out of like an Abyssal Blade, let's say, than an MKB when you're versus this particular setup of just a Radiance and no Butterfly or Solar. So that's kind of a slight thing as well. If they had an Abyssal, they could probably stop the Witch Doctor while he's BKB, but because they don't, and they all built like super tanky builds with Satanic and SNY and Scotty and whatnot, that they don't actually have the damage to kill him because they will die themselves without BKBs on them. So they get wiped at this point, and it's only a matter of time before Alliance realizes that none of them have buybacks, or actually only 2 of them have buybacks, and 1 of them is a Crystal Maiden. So it's pretty much just a Juggernaut that they have to deal with for the next 70 seconds. So they push it to high ground, and then here you see like a huge difference in how Alliance approached the tower siege and how NiP approached the throne siege. So you'll notice they take down the T3s, and then right after that, they clearly have like a good game caller or just good team cohesion, because like he's already attacking on the T4s. They clear down the T3, and then they don't even skip a beat. Like none of them even attack the racks once. They all just immediately focus. They're all in the same game plan. They go for the T4s immediately, and they start beating them down. So they do have the buyback on the Juggernaut, but he has 13 seconds left. He really doesn't want to use it because it's just 10 seconds until he revives. But he times his buyback with the puck revival, and then eventually they try and defend the throne. So Alliance, they just throw out all their CCs, and then they also focus all their right clicks on the throne because they realize they need to try and fight before SF revives, and that they have a very small window to try and take down this throne. So they kind of just like BKB, they ignore Seal Kid, they ignore the puck, and there's really a lot of discipline to not hit these annoying int heroes that are bugging you and just go straight for the throne. So you know, this is like a kind of different level of teamwork that we see from the 2 teams. And yeah, you can also say that like Alliance, they only have like one objective in mind, kind of only one way to win the game, so it's much more obvious from them. But I think that's a really difficult play to make in that sort of heated situation, that you can end the game like that in such a stunning fashion. So again, kind of a few things to take away from this. Shiva's is exceptionally good versus Mega Creeps. Radiance is so-so, and of course the typical Vlad's and Maelstrom is obviously pretty good. Getting a gem, if you're either team, is super important so that you can get the jump on people, and having them like kind of always live in fear because of blink disables, like blink hex, blink abyssal, I think were one of the two things that they were kind of missing in this late game, as well as Lotus Orb to try and defend against Alchemist. Not that they could have bought it on the fly, because they were actually a little bit pressed for gold because it wasn't super late game, but it is still something to consider that NiP could have gotten to help win the game, because Alchemist doesn't have a BKB, and if he stuns himself, that's a lot of damage that they're losing out on. And lastly, it's way more important to follow a bad game plan than have people split up. So if you're in a game, or if you're a competitive player and you think your captain has a terrible idea and they throw out something, hey, let's go do this, let's take Roche, and you're like, oh god, I really don't want to take Roche because of, you know, whatever alarms are in your head going off, sometimes you still have to do it, because being unified in a bad plan is way better than being split on multiple good plans. So keep that in mind for your own play, and hopefully you take something away from this pretty interesting game. And of course, we will see Alliance in Frankfurt. And yeah, thank you guys. And if you want to watch this game again, just go to the watch tab and you can download it. It's free, no ticket necessary. And Alliance vs NiP game number 2. Thank you guys. Please subscribe, youtube.com/MerliniDota. Thank you once again.